And we are. Last week we took a break and we sort of we went somewhere else. We went into checking out other sources and saw other sources that deal with this issue that the Rambam brings up. And I sort of wanted to point out that the Rambam's idea of Torah shebichtav and Torah sheba'al peh, or the relationship between the two, is much more complex than we usually get. All right, not break the roll here. After this morning shir, we have to go into the evening shir. This is serious stuff. This is like a high madrega ad chatzot. Okay, so that's what we did last time, and really it dealt with the first sources pretty much of the first two parts of what the Rambam brings of a 5-part division of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So that we talked about the Perushim Mekubalim, right? I don't have to remind everyone here, Perushim Mekubalim, nachon, that it's a long time. We have a long time here, Simcha. We're gonna have to build up our stamina. So we talked about the Perushim Mekubalim. Then he talked about Halachal Moshe Sinai. We dealt with that. Now we're going to be dealing with the third part. The third one is actually probably the most complex of all the parts of the Torah Sheba'al Peh that we're dealing with now. I will say, I'm going to be careful here as we learn it, since the Rambam Shita in itself is not 100% clear, and he's presenting what really is probably the most dealt with of all the parts of the halacha. So let's take a look at Achelek HaShlishi. You guys see? Remind you, someone should be able to stop you in a dark alley and you'll be able to tell him in the middle of the night, in the middle of your sleep, you'd wake up. Yeah, you got it there? Yeah. So the first two parts you have to know, kacha, halachot mekubalot and halachal Moshe Sinai. Let me do a little test here. Yosef, what's the difference between halacha mekubalet and halachal Moshe Sinai?
Halachal Moshe Sinai is almost the same.
Right. What's the difference? First of all, you're right. They're almost the same. What's the difference? This is live too, so you're the whole world is listening to this. Okay.
Pretty music.
The Torah Sinai is not written.
Meule. I'm gonna change what you said. It's not exactly not written. There's no reference to it in the text. Okay, just to medayek what he said to say it a little more clear. There's no reference in the text, as opposed to Torah to halachot mekubalot. There is some hint in the text, some connection that you can find a place for. Halachah Moshe Sinai is the same essentially as the halachah mekubelet. It just doesn't have a basis in the text. The third shlav that we're going into now is a completely different creature. Let's take a look. והחלק השלישי, הם הדינים המוצאים בדרכי ההיקש, ותיפול בהם המחלוקת, כמו שזכרנו, ויפסק בהם כדעת הרוב, כמו שיסדנו. וזה כאשר יהיה העניין שקול מצד העיון. ולפיכך יאמרו, אם הלכה נקבל ואם לדין יש תשובה. I think we mentioned this at the very end of the 2 lessons ago, but now I want to open it up more. ואומנם יפלו המחלוקות, I'll go back in a minute, ואומנם יפלו המחלוקת והוויכוח במה שלא נשמע בו קבלה, ותמצאם בכל התלמוד, יחקרו על דרכי ההיקש אשר בסיבתם נפלה המחלוקת בין החולקים, ויאמרו במאי כמפלגה, או מאי טעמי דרבי פלוני, או מאי ביניו, לפי שפעמים יביאו דברים בזה העניין בקצת מקומות, ויודיעו סיבת המחלוקת, ויאמרו, thank you very much, ויאמרו שפלוני נתלה במאמר, פלוני ופלוני נתלה במאמר, פלוני וכיוצא בזה. Okay, this third level, all right, this third level is the in-between level. I'll explain what I mean when I say an in-between level in a minute. These are dinim halachot that are brought out, mutza'im, are brought out b'darkei ha'ikesh, in ways of hikesh. Now hikesh in the Rambam is a tough word, okay? Hikesh, usually when we see the word hikesh, hikesh means liken one thing to another, or putting one thing together with another thing, okay? So hikesh, what?
Comparison?
It's way wider than comparison, but yes, okay? In other words, usually when we talk about Hekesh, that something's learned in Hekesh, on the very elementary level, it's when one pasuk is next to another pasuk, I said there's a hekesh between the psukim. They're close to each other. Okay, and we learned that's on the very minimalistic level. When the Rambam says hekesh, in my opinion, from what I understand from the Rambam, he's talking about every single possible way you could learn something from the text itself. Okay, any way. The Shosh Esrei Midot. There are other midot that you learn for Agadah. 32 midot. There's Rabbi Akiva's shita that works a little different than Rabbi Ishmael, who has a 13 midot. There are many, many different ways of going into the text. Smichut parshiot, right? Whose parshas are close to each other. Gezerah Shava, as we all know. There are many, many, many. I hope everyone knows what I'm talking about when I'm mentioning these things. When there are two parshiot that are next to each other, two subject matters in the Torah that are next to each other, you ask why. The same way in psukim, like in Parashat Kedoshim, right? You go through the psukim, mitzvah, 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 mitzvah. Why? Why is this the order? Why is this one before this? Why are they mentioned the same pasuk? All these are shitot of trying to decipher what Hashem wants from us. Okay? Now, we know, what are our bases we have when we want to understand what Hashem wants from us? We have the halacha the Moshe Sinai, right? We have the halachot mekubalot. We have the explanations of the mitzvot that give us a lot of understanding of what Hashem wants from us. But there are always questions what we do in places we don't know what Hashem wants from us. That's where these halachot come in here. Now I don't know. We talked about. We know that. I'll use electricity again. That's the example we seem to be using all the time, right? I know there are a lot of Isurei Shabbat. Okay, there are Lametet Avot Melacha. There are Lametet Avot. Now I have this new thing that I'm not quite sure what to do with. Okay, electricity. I don't know where to put that in. So you'll have someone saying it's buneh, and someone say it's mavir. Someone says it's building. Someone says it's lighting a fire. So there are different things. So they'll have to discuss where this is coming from and what this is. How do I prove my point? How do I say what it is? I'm going to use everything I have at my disposal to try to figure out what this halacha, where it comes from. But it's not from Moshe Sinai, that's for sure. But is it going to be d'oraita now? Now here's the tricky part, okay? Chachamim are going to say you can't turn on a light for Shabbat, okay? And you can't use chashmal on Shabbat. Did Hashem say you can't use chashmal on Shabbat? No. Hashem said you can't light fire on Shabbat. So is chashmal fire? Is electricity fire? Well, it's an interesting question, right?
No.
So turning on electricity on Shabbat. I turn on a light on Shabbat.
Depends on the bulb.
The worst bulb that it could be, the old one,
Yeah,
not a halogen.
That's fine because they start to glow.
I turn that. But is that fire mamash?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's glowing. It's a glowing piece of
heat. It's your thing. It's heat. You're heating something up, right? So you'd put that in, and that would be so. Now, so is it deoraita?
Yeah, I would say yes.
I would say yes. But obviously Hashem didn't say that that's deoraita, nachon? So
we're making fire basically. The
I understand. So we're saying it basically you're making fire, right? That's what we're saying. Someone had to say this is fire, and this equals fire in that sense. There was no such thing beforehand. Someone had to decide. By the way, some people say that's not the problem in electricity. One of the opinions is that it's building, right? That the problem is the circuit. They're connecting the circuit, and the fire wasn't the issue.
I'm more inclined.
I'm just saying. So there's a disagreement. What you're chayav with. But both shitot would say that it's doraita. One would be from this, one would be from this. But they have a machloket. They have a discussion where it's from. So why is it doraita if it's obviously not what Hashem said? So I want to put this in another position. Okay, it's already a little complicated. New issues that come up. What Chachamim are trying to do is trying to see how they come out of the stuff we know already. Psukim, halachot Moshe Sinai, halachot mekubalot is all a big mix I have together of prior knowledge plus the methods of trying to understand the text. From this comes out a halacha. And what I'm trying to do, mamash, is understand what Hashem wants from me. What Hashem wants from us in this situation, because that's what a Jew always asks. What does Hashem want from me? That's what we're doing in our world. What does he want from us in our moral world? What does he want from us in our ethical world? What does he want from us in our personal midot, in our character traits mode? What does he want from us in our actions? What does he want from us in our thoughts? What does he want from us? That's what we want to know. What Hashem wants. That's clearly what Chazal were always trying to do. Even when they get into the little tiny minutia of things that are you're so like what's going on here. Every single pine is in a sense asking, how do I not be over on Isur Gezer? If they go into the minutia of a din of contracts, right? Contracts between people. What could happen if you do something wrong? It could be stealing. It could be gezer. It could be gneva. It could be hurting someone else. There are all kinds of things that can happen if you're wrong in monetary issues. So Chazal say, well, there's no way we're going to go over. We're going to be over gezer. So every single halacha, in a sense, has a father, I'll say. The father is the mitzvah midoraita. All right? But what comes out of it and what's learned from it may also be doraita. And that's this situation we're in the middle, okay? So let's go back and read this again. These are the dinim that I pull out through using all the tools that we have to figure out what the Torah wants from us. And here's a new thing. There could be a machloket on these ones. Why could there be a machloket? Because it's not given from Sinai. And man is human, which is sort of like the same as with Hanuman, cinnamon, what's the word? Would you say it's the same thing? Man is human. Synonymous, right? Man is human. And therefore, if Simcha learns this and he sees something, that doesn't mean I'm going to learn it and see the same thing. We may not even get to the same halacha. We may not even agree on the halacha. Simcha may say it's mutar and I may say it's asur, or a certain thing. And we're both going to bring proofs for our shitot, from the text, from what we understand, we're going to try to bring it. But it's not certain anymore. It's not given from Sinai anymore. Now it's our realm. It's the human realm. Okay? What's fascinating, though, it's a human realm, but it may be deoraita. You guys get me on this one? Up until, it may be from the Torah. Deoraita, derabbanan. It may be Torah obligated in a sense, okay? Because what we're really trying to do is understand what the Torah is, but who gives the samchut, who gives the authority to the halachic decision? The Sanhedrin. That's why the Sanhedrin is so important in halacha. It's so important. We don't understand how important it is. Because we live in a world that is not creative anymore. Our halacha is I would say, is creative in a certain way. But it's not mamash creative. It doesn't create halachot anymore, our world. Our world is trying to understand very, very, very far branches, let's say, in the halachic tree. Here we're talking about, even though the Rambam calls them anafim, these are branches, it's not like the trunk, it's not the ikar, it's still close branches. And to decide myriad of halachot, many halachot are brought out from here, from this level, okay? And that's where he says in the Gemara, they have discussions about these things. And they ask them, what's your source? And what's the difference between him and him? Why do you say this and you say this? Why did you say mutar and you say asur? Why did you say tahor and you say tameh? Why do you say patur and you say asur? What? Chayav skila. Why? Why is this happening? And we want to understand. Because, and then the Rambam brings, and then sometimes they say, im halacha nekabel. Okay, listen, if halacha means if you received this, if this is something you've received, that's it, we're done. I'm stopping my talk, that's it, the discussion's over. But if imladin, if this is something you learned, yes, tshuva, I can argue with you. So that's the head. If it's at your level, I can argue with you. I'm not just argumentative, I think otherwise. But there we could discuss things. If it's a halacha, I'm done. That's from Sinai, we're done with that. There's no discussion. Now it's interesting that not everyone had the halacha, and sometimes someone will ask someone else, is it halacha? Did you receive this? And the chacham will say, yes, I received it. Which means that not everyone received everything. Okay, in other words, they're apparently over in that reception of the halachot, there's also a hierarchy of people who are more in the focus, who've received things, and people who are left. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkonus, who's known as a bor sid she'eno ma'abed tipa, right? He's known as a well that never leaves a drop, loses a drop. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkonus, a great memory, right? Who knew everything, remembered everything. It's super important, his position in Am Yisrael. Super important, someone like this, who knows knows everything. And you have to, right? We learned in the Gemara and Tmura how when Moshe Rabbeinu died, 3,000 halachot were forgotten. Remember, they were forgotten. Yeshua forgot. I mean, someone wants to kill him because he forgot them, and they don't know what to do. And then Basof, Otniel ben Knaz, using the techniques said here of bringing things out through the halachot mekubalot, have a connection to the text. He recreated them in a sense. He sort of re-remembered them because they were known, and then he uses the text to refine them. That's what Yeshua ben Nun does. But the possibility of forgetting exists. And it's a danger. So people like Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkonus are really, really important, who knew the halacha well. We have been subjugated to books, and it is not pashut that we've been subjugated to books to be our memory. Just like nowadays we're subjugated to phones to be our memory, or computers. Our memory has been, we lost a lot in the fact that it's only books. There's a great keta that Rav Shilat brings later, where he talks about the disasters of writing things down and how tradition, I'll bring it now already, he says how tradition, it was a beautiful keta I never thought about before I was preparing, but tradition is one, almost. In other words, tradition is, you accept it as is, while the written world, dafka, the written word, has lots of commentary. When someone writes something down, then people understand it differently. Dafka, story, sort of, you repeat the story. The story gets repeated, even though people can embellish stories also. But there's something about the transferring of the oral Torah, that what you heard is what it is. Once it's written down, you start taking it apart. And you start asking, it's almost counterintuitive to what I would think usually. I would think, when someone says something, you could forget it, you could mix it up, you can move it around because it's not solid.
Once something is solidified, it makes it a lot more susceptible to criticism.
So
you can criticize which is written, as opposed to a story which changes every time it's told in some regard.
No, it's always a story, but that keeps its essence. I think that's what more what he was saying. He was saying Dafka, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, was not supposed to be written down so that people don't change it up. Dafka, when it's written, it becomes more susceptible to problems. It was shocked for me. I do not usually think that way. I thought it was a very interesting understanding. But let's go on, okay? Okay. There will be machlokot. And then the Gemara will explain, as he says, this is what he said, this is what he said. Now the Rambam puts a parenthesis and he says like this. Aval machshevet mi shechoshev שהדינים שנחלקו בהם, I'm in the next paragraph, right? מחשבת מי שחושב שהדינים שנחלקו בהם הם גם כן מקובלים ממשה. ואומנם נפלה מחלוקת מדרך הטעות בשמועות או השכחה. If you think that they're having מחלוקות on the original halachot from Moshe Sinai. ושהאחד קיבל האמת והאחד טעה בקבלתו. And one guy just made a mistake. They're arguing, but one guy's right and one guy's wrong. And these are talking about halachot that were received at Sinai. O shachach, o lo shama berabo, kol ma shetzarich lishmoa. He didn't hear properly. And this person who's saying that this could happen, the Rambam is going to blast this out of the water. He's saying this is a possibility one may have thought. Okay, you may think that they're arguing in the Gemara even about the halachot mekubalot. Okay, one guy says this, one guy says this. You may have thought this. And to bring proof to this wrong thought, you may bring this statement. Nisharabu talmidei Shammai v'Hillel shelo shimshu kol tzorkam ravta machloket b'Yisrael v'nasta Torah k'shtei torot. There is a quote brought in your Masechet Sotah, when there were a lot of students of Shammai and a lot of students of Hillel who did not shelo shimshu kol tzorkam, who didn't really learn well enough. Okay? Then there were a lot of machlokot, and the Torah became two Torot. So you may think, okay, the Torah became two Torot. within the halachot mekubalot, within the basic halachot that Moshe received at Sinai. He says, "Hine ze Hashem hayodea min ha'ma'amarim ha'mechuarim ve'hamiguanim me'od." This is a low base statement to say something like this. If you say that these halachot, that there's a machloket on the halachot mekubalot. No. If you say something like that. Hem divrei mi she'eino mesig ve'eino medakdek beikarim. This is someone who doesn't understand and is not precise in his understanding the basics of what I told you before, says the Rambam. Umetil dofi banashim asher itkabla mehem haTorah v'ze kulo batel. And you have a critique on the people who put the Torah forward, and that is non-existent. What does he say here, Beth? I mean, Rav Shila tells us them. Well, let's go on for a little. V'omnam. However, yigrom lezot ha'emunah nifsedet miut hasaga ledivrei hachachamim. Why would someone think that they argue about these basic halachot? Because you don't understand the Gemara. You didn't learn the Gemara well enough. לפי שהם מצאו כי הפירוש מקובל ממשה. וזה נכון, כמו שיסדנו. ולא הבדינו בין העיקרים המקובלים והתולדות המוצאות. They didn't divide between the basic halachot and the halachot we were talking about before, the ones that the people developed, okay, that the people instituted. The rabbis instituted. But it's not the rabbis, it's from Moshe Rabbeinu, people have been doing this. That man has instituted, okay? They didn't make the difference. It says, and you get it all mixed up. You're learning a sugya and you start saying, oh, there's a machloket in this. The Rambam says, stop. Learn better. What exactly are they arguing about and what are they not arguing about? You have to ask. In every sugya in the Gemara, you have to ask, what are they agreeing on? Which then becomes the ikarim. These are the halachot Moshe Sinai. These are the halachot mekubalot. These are the basic halachot. And what are they arguing about? And says the Rambam, you will see that they never argue on the ikarim. They only argue on the things that are brought out later, the less essential halachot. They're important, but they're less essential. What he calls the anfei anafim, he's going to say in a minute, the branches of the branches. But the basic, major branches, no machloket about them. You think, oh, the Gemara is full of machlokot. They're right. Someone who learns Gemara, right? Anyone learn Gemara here? Oh, it's all machlokot. They're always arguing about the Gemara, right? Nachon? Always arguing the Gemara. Nachon? You've seen the Gemara?
Of course.
Arguments all the time. Oh, it's all arguments. Says the Rambam, you are not reading the Gemara correctly. From the argument, you have to read backwards. What are they not arguing about? And they're not arguing about a lot of halachot. There are a lot of things that are barur. Those are the gold halachot. Those are the halachot from Sinai. And no one's cholik on them. If you see a machloket, that's already category 3, what we'll call it now. Okay? Achelik ashlishi. That means this is an argument that is a man-made argument. Again, I want to be careful here what I'm saying. It's man-made, but it doesn't mean it's not Deoraita. It doesn't mean it's not from the Torah. It means that it wasn't part of the oral Torah. Okay? It is a new development, but it still derives or comes or is brought from the Torah. Okay? So, velo yivdilu ben ikarim ukumelim v'toldot hamutzot. Aval ata, you, the reader, says the Rambam, you who's reading this, ata, us. Im tesupak badavar. If you're in doubt about this issue, lo tesupak shemachloket beit Shammai tele b'omra mechabdim et habayit v'achar kach notlim le'adayim v'achar kach mechabdim et habayit. En echad mishnei ha'ma'amarim mekubalim u'Moshe v'lo shamu miSinai. He says this machloket that Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel have about a certain amount of taking the crumbs of a certain size off the table, what you should do first. First you clear it, or you wash your hands. First you wash your hands, or you clear it. A machloket in Masechet Brachot. Don't think that this machloket has anything to do with something at Sinai. It's not. He says, Ela sibat machloktam ma shezachar. The machloket is she'echad mehem oser hashimush ba'amaretz v'acher metir bazeh. It's a completely different machloket. It's very far whether you can use someone who's an amaretz who may not know the halachot, if you can use him to clear the table or not, because he may not know that you have to relate to food in a certain way. That's the machloket. Says the Rambam, that's not a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That's not a halacha mekubelet. This is a discussion that comes out of it. And that's why there's a machloket. They could have a machloket on this. This is anfei anafim. Look what he says it. V'chen kol hadome למחלוקות אשר הם anfei ha'anafim. That's where you have your machlokot. Further, the Rambam says, be careful when you read. And the Rambam hints that if you think, you guys hear me here? If you think the machlokot are on the halachot ha'mekubalot, you are putting a blemish on the Talmidei Chachamim, Hagdolim, who were the ones who transmitted the Masoret. Because they were super careful. Super careful. When they transmitted the Torah Sheba'al Peh, to make sure they transmit it accurately. And if someone had a safek, or someone wasn't sure, he would not say it. In other words, if someone here would say, this is the halacha mekubelet, the other guy wouldn't say, oh, but I think maybe otherwise, or maybe I heard otherwise. Right, we said, if that's halacha, that's it. I'm done. They don't argue about these things. It's mamash. It's a certain amount of respect and reverence that you would have for these halachot. He says the Chachamim had reverence for these. If you think they could just throw around arguments about it, then you don't understand the reverence of these halachot. You can't touch these things. If you touch these things, you're destroying the Torah. Mamash, destroying the Torah. You think Chachamim played around with these things? If you think they have a machlokot and that you're saying they're playing around with the Torah mishamayim. They do not do that. Where do they play around, quote unquote, it's not the right word. Where are they willing to bring themselves? In a place that we don't know. Then they're trying to understand the divine will. And then because they're human, they're going to get to different opinions. Possibly. And let's look at the next paragraph, because the Rambam's, even on that, he's going to say something. And here the Rambam's going to give a philosophical truth, okay, that clashes a little bit with modern day thinking. Okay, let's take a look. The quote he said before, that someone might say, when there are a lot of Talmidim who didn't learn well enough, there are a lot of machlokot. Right there you said, you may have thought it's in the machlokot, it may be in the halachot ha'mekubal. He said, forget it, it's not there. So what does it mean? So where is there machlokot? It's very clear what they're talking about. אם יהיו שקולים בתבונה ובעיון ובידיעת העיקרים אשר יולידו מהם, לא תיפול ביניהם מחלוקת כלל במה שיוציאו בהיקש. ואם תיפול תהיה מועטה, כמו שלא נמצא לעולם מחלוקת בין שמאי והלל אלא בהלכות יחידות. לפי שהקשה שניהם, וכל מה שהוציאו בהיקש היו קרובים זה לזה. He says like this, if someone is really smart, and each, me and Chaim are both learning the same subject matter. Now we're both really smart. We both have all the material in front of us, all the options. We know how things work. Says the Rambam, I will expect us to get to the same maskana. I will expect us to get to the same decision in any given situation. That's what he would expect. And he says, I'll show you how I'm right. Because Shammai and Hillel themselves almost never had a machloket. Who has a machloket? Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. That's the statement we just said. When there were a lot of students who didn't learn enough, then they started having machlokot. Beseder? Says the Rambam, if two people who are, again, im yushkulim betvuna, they are equal in understanding or comprehension, ubiyun, and the ability to delve into text or delve into the subject matter, ubiyadiati karim, and knowing the basics, lo tipol b'machloket klal. They won't have a machloket because they'll understand the basic truth that is at the bottom of whatever they're talking about. When is there a problem? When people aren't professional, when people aren't studious enough, then you get to all kinds of different opinions. Let's go on, okay? There was no machloket because they were always pretty much on the ball. Each one of them had pretty much the same body of knowledge, the same abilities, the same tools to use. You get to the same thing. וכאשר נתמעטה דרישת תלמידיהם, when the students lessened and weren't as diligent, ונחלש היקשם ביחס להלל ושמאי רבותיהם, they weren't as able to use the tools of the Torah as their rabbis were. נפלה מחלוקת ביניהם בעת העיון בדברים רבים. There all kinds of things started becoming מחלוקת. היות שהיקש כל איש מהם לפי ערך שכלו, ומה שאצלו מן העיקרים. Each one of them in his ability of his mind and how much he comprehends the basic concepts that are the basic of all discussions. ואין להשימם בכל זה. Says the Rambam, you can't blame them, these students. Like to say that you're not Hillel HaZaken. I'm not Hillel HaZaken, מה לעשות? אין להשימם בכל זה. לפי שאנו לא נחייב שני האנשים המתווכחים שיתווכחו בשכל יהושע ופנחס. You're not Yehoshua. Sorry, I'm sorry if I'm hurting anyone's feelings. That they're saying we're not Yehoshua and we're not Pinchas. מה לעשות? Sorry, Simcha, I'm sorry. Says the Rambam, not everyone's Yehoshua and Pinchas. What are you going to do? מה לעשות? There are many people in the world. There are many levels, and not everyone's going to get there to the truth, to the basics. ואין אנו גם כן מפקפקים במה שנחלקו בו. היות שאין הם כמו שמאי והלל ומי שלמעלה מהם. We're not going to doubt them either because they're doing their best. We're not going to think they're not honest. We're not going to think they're trying to, this guy's trying to bend the halacha in a way. No, they're doing their best. But their best is limited. That's the statement. Their best is limited. But he goes on, כי השם יתפאר ויתרומם לא ציוונו בעבודתו בזה, אלא כיוונו לשמוע מחכמי איזה דור שיהיה. This statement he's going to quote now is really, really important in Torah Shebaal Peh. What is this statement? ולשופט אשר יהיה בימים ההם. You guys ever hear this statement? You listen to the judge who you have in those days. Say Chazal, Shmuel bedoro ki yiftach bedoro. I don't know who's the other one they bring there. Eli bedor, Otniel bedoro, Shimshon bedoro. Those are who the other ones are. In other words, there's Shmuel Hanavi, and there's Yiftach. Ma lasot, they're not the same level. But if you lived in Yiftach's time, you know who you have to listen to? Yiftach. That's the way it is. Every generation has its leaders, has its people who are going to, and that's Beseder. It's how Hashem planned the Torah.
What if they made a Gezerah for a long time?
Well, we're not in Gezerot yet. Gezerot, we're going to get there. So that's the Chereka Revi. Next one. We're going to get to Gezerot, okay? And then Be'emet becomes interesting because there's different. Right now, I'm not talking about Gezerah at all. This is the category 3. Okay, it's important to understand. It's category 3. You guys have to remember this. Like I tested Yosef on categories 1 and 2. Category 3 are the halachot that are used by Chachamim to translate modern questions, let's call it that way, or questions they don't know the answer to, through their understanding of the Torah. And when I say the Torah, it's all the Torah. Everything they have to their use. Includes what Hashem said, the written Torah, and everything that came before them. Okay? These are all the tools they have to try to understand what Ratzon Hashem is. But when they get to a decision, and the Sanhedrin says, this is the opinion we accept, that is the law. That's what you have to do. What?
It becomes halakha.
It becomes the halakha. But since I'm using interesting language, I'm going to say a little more. It becomes part of the mitzvah, almost. Okay, that's to say, it's part of the mitzvah itself. So there, we use halakha in a very large range. When you say the halakha, it's a problem. Everything we're talking about is halakha. So I'm going to be more meduyak. It doesn't become the halakha, it becomes part of the mitzvah. And that's a higher level than the halakha, as you would say. It's written in the Shulchan Aruch in that sense. I'm talking about this is part of mitzvat, name it, one of the 613, doesn't matter. Part of mitzvat, binyan Beit HaMikdash, is this. So there?
So consider like Rabbi Melamed.
What about him?
He transposed the halakha from old times to modern times.
Good. So Rabbi Melamed is trying to figure out what to do. We're learning about worms now. Nachon, what do you do in these situations? So in a sense, they're talking about mitzvot d'oraita mamash. Nachon? And he's going to say, Nagid, he says you can eat X, and someone else, Rabbi Y, says you can't eat X. Okay? What we really need is What do we need now?
Sanhedrin?
A Sanhedrin. That's exactly what we need. In other words, our generation is bereft of someone deciding this is the halacha. And had they decided, okay, that would be a good example. They decide that eating this X worm or this situation is mamash, the isur that it says in the Torah, shratzim, even though it doesn't talk about that specific case in the Torah, that would become deoraita. And if you ate it, you'd be chayav malkot.
So if there's like the
4, 6, 5 sets of malkot, whatever it is, okay. You'd be chayav malkot.
got 8.
What? We didn't get to 8. It was 4, 5, or 6. Okay.
My question is, if that's the case, then the modern times, if we don't have Sanhedrin, it's considered like the Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. It's like there's machloket all around the place, and it appears like we didn't learn from.
Whoa, 1 second. That's the fact that there's a machloket all over the place is not only legitimate. This is what the Rambam's saying. It's necessary. It's the way the world is, and it's okay per se. That's what Hashem said. It's not ideal. Ideally, said the Rambam, halvai that we would be like Hillel and Shammai, but not everyone's like Pinchas and Yoshua. Malasot. So that we have machlokot. That's fine, and the Sanhedrin is going to solve our problems for those things. I'm saying our situation nowadays, we're stuck because we have no one who decide what the halacha is, what the final decision is. I said halacha. The final decision is what?
There's still big minhagim.
Yeah, that minhagim is later. You're bringing everything forward. You're jumping the gun here. Seder? Zerot and minhagim. Seder?
It is halacha like before could fix, but now because no way to fix it became stuck and became machloket.
Well, the machloket stays. That's what happens now. There was always machloket, but what happened is they would make a decision. We'd sit around. We'd be the Sanhedrin, and we say, "Okay, you say one thing, you say another thing. Let's vote." It would be, in a sense, that simple.
So it's a halacha like from beginning is stuck. It's machloket.
Right, now we have too much machloket. We have no way of solving a machloket. So now this rabbi can say Y, and this rabbi can say X, and we're... Zeu. What do you do? What do I do? The simple person, what do I do in this situation is an interesting question. So let's come back here. ולא שהם טועים בתושמות, וקיבל אחד אמת ואחד שקר. ומה מבורים אל הדברים למי שבונן מהם, ומה גדול זה העיקר בתורה. It's very important to understand. They're not mistaking what they heard from Sinai. They're discussing what they have, and then that's the matzav, okay? So, the Rambam, though, and here he hints it to it here. He's going to talk about it later, where he talks about the why they bring why Rabbi wrote down the machlokot. Here's another question: why Rabbi wrote down the machlokot? He's going to talk about that on the next page. Probably not get it today, but we're talking about how. But I want to just point out that the Rambam really believed in one truth. Let's not make a mistake here. The Rambam thought there was a truth. He is not in multiple truths, okay? It's not like often the way we understand the question, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim, nachon? Nachon? We think that there is that truth, be'emet, is multifaceted in a sense. So the Rambam doesn't seem to think that way. The Rambam thinks there is a truth, okay? And that truth could be accessible to the perfect person in a sense. The problem isn't in the truth, the problem is in people. People, by being people, are not able to comprehend the whole truth or always be correct in what they're saying. Sometimes they may be right, but they're not always going to be there, okay? Of course, we go back here to Tanuro Shel Achnai, to the story, that famous story, where a bat kol comes out and says Rabbi Eliezer is right. And then, so if Rabbi Eliezer is right, there's an ultimate truth. And then Rabbi Yoshua, who says Lo b'shamayim, so one way of explaining that is there is a truth, but be'etzem, what we have to do here is follow the majority. That's just what we have to do, even if it's not true, because that's just the best way of working things out. That seems to be pretty much what the Rambam thinks. Okay, on a general level, that seems to be what he thinks. There is a knowledge, but malasot, we have to follow the majority. That's the way to do it. Why do we have to follow the majority? First of all, Hashem decided that's how we have to do it. Secondly, you could say it's just the best way of working into the human frailty, right? The fact that humans are error prone. So how else are you going to do it? There's no other way to do it, and there's not going to be a bat kol every time that says what to say. Tov, 3 parts we've had. All right. Again, as I said, the third part is the most complex of the halachot we've gotten to now. Now we're going to the fourth, what Josh mentioned before, an inyan called the gezerah. All right, let's take a look at it. Hachelek HaRevi'i, fourth part. There are 5 parts. This is the fourth. Hem adinim asher tiknum hanevi'im v'achachamim b'chol dor v'dor al derech hasiyag v'agader laTorah. A fence to the Torah. These are halachot, what we call, or obligations, let me put it that way, that the Chachamim said throughout all the generations, and their idea is to fence the Torah. Vehem asher tziva Adonai letaknam, b'ma'amar klali vehu omro, ushmartem et mishmarti. Let me read you guys where this says this, okay? Says the Torah in Parashat Vayikra Yudchet. Vayikra Yudchet. Do we have a Lamed? Okay. This is the very, very end of Parashat Achremot. After we talked about all the arayot, all the sexual sins that you could do, it says like this. The land won't throw you out or throw you up, or however you want to read it. Anyone who does these abominations, they'll be cut off from their people. ושמרתם את משמרתי, לבלתי עשות מחוקות התועבות אשר נעשו לפניכם, ולא תטמאו בהם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. You will keep my guard. ושמרתם את משמרתי. What is he talking about? What's משמרתי? What does that mean? You will keep my guard, so that you won't do any of these abominations. The interesting possible perushim we can do here. The Rambam says like this: Vehu omro shmartem mishmarti uba hakabala, meaning masoret. Good. This is halacha mekubelet. Okay, halacha mekubelet says, do you know how to read these words? Ushmartem et mishmarti. It means asu mishmeret lemishmarti. Make a guard around my guards. Put a guard around the mitzvot. Vehem asher yikru chachamim, Josh, gzerot. This is what a gzerah is. When chachamim say there's a gzerah, it means like this. There is a mitzvah deoraita that I'm very afraid I don't want to go over Ratzon Hashem. These are always our marks. I don't want to do something that Hashem doesn't want me to do. So I am going to take another step forwards. And I'm going to say, you can't do this, don't even do this. There are 2 examples, okay, in the Torah that are more famous, that the Torah itself puts a fence around itself, what it seems to be. Which is the first one? We just saw it 2 parshas ago. The Nazir. Right, a Nazir can't eat anything that has to do with grapes. He can't eat the grapes. It seems to be, we don't want him drinking wine. That's how we understand it. You don't want him drinking wine. So that he doesn't want to drink wine, you don't drink anything. The other is, a famous isur in itself, is nigia, right? To touch a woman that you're not allowed to have relations with. You can't even touch her. So why can you even touch her? Just another thing. So these are Torah. These are mitzvot be'atzmam. These are mitzvot themselves, but they're in the mindset of a gzera. Chachamim have many gzerot, right? Muktzeh, according to many opinions, is a gzera, that you don't take something out, right? That you don't move something, and lotzi mirashut l'rashut is one of the examples. There are hundreds of gzerot. There are lots of gzerot that we have that Chachamim said, don't do this, because if you do this, you're going to get close to this, and we don't want you to get close to this. So stay further away. Nachon? Take it like our own lives, right? Probably in the laws of a country. There are things that we really don't want you to do, and there are things that we don't want you to do so that you don't get to the things we really don't want you to do, okay? I mean, think out loud here, people. What are these things that we could think of something like this? Okay, probably in driving there are things like this, right? Don't do this so that you don't get to this. So there are all kinds of things to make sure you don't kill someone when you're driving. So there are all kinds of, there's a speed limit. Nachon? What? The Torah is limited, and it's always limited. There are two levels, I'll say. They can't think of everything. Hashem could have thought of everything, but then it would be immeasurable. You wouldn't be able to. He couldn't give to Moshe this guf yeda, this body of knowledge that would be incomprehensible. That's one side of the statement. This is technically impossible. What? The oral Torah is a lot. It's a ton, but it's not everything. It's not all this. Okay, no, it's not all this and all everything here, right? And that's one way. So that's a technical answer. I think a more involved answer is that Hashem wants us to be involved in the Torah. That is part of the Torah. When it says "Asu mishmeret lemishmarti," Hashem wants us to do it. It's a deoraita commandment to do this. Hashem wants man to be thinking about these things. Wants Beitin to be thinking of these things. You should be trying and attempting to become more and more kadosh, to become more and more tahor. You should do this and use your own ingenuity to do this. How to do this? That's why Gzerak over different people give different Gzerot. There are certain times when this Gzerah is what is the major thing that needs to be done, and another time another Gzerah will be. One could even say, possibly, Gzerot are very oriented to the time. And if they gave one Gzerah, if Hashem decided the Gzerot, then it may not be fitting for another time. We want man to be. Now, you asked the question whether a Gzerah could be mitbatel. That's an interesting question that the Rambam himself deals with, and it's not so clear. So let's read a little more into this Gzerot here. ואפשר שתיפול גם בהם מחלוקת. There could be a מחלוקת about גזירות. כשיראה אחד לאסור כך וכך מפני כך וכך, ולא יראה אחר כך. You may say, listen, guys, I think we should, since eating pig is forbidden, we shouldn't grow pig in Eretz Yisrael. Okay? You shouldn't grow, that's a gzera. Not to grow pigs in Eretz Yisrael. Because then people might eat them. Someone will say, come on, man. The industry is so important, pig industry is so important that we need it for all kinds of things, for glue, for who knows what you use pig things for. We shouldn't do gzera. And that's a legitimate machloket they can have. Okay? Sort of reminds us of what? Of the category 3, where they had a discussion whether I understand what the mitzvah is telling me to do. Is that there?
Offense of the Torah.
No, category 4 is offense of the Torah. What's category 3 is what we just talked about until now.
Pushing the oraita to the more
Exactly, of understanding the new reality or the new halachot from the Torah mamash. Okay?
It's just masoret.
What's just masoret?
Like for example, Lucas.
The what?
Like a Lucas is the insect, like kosher, say like that.
Right. That's not a gzera or a machloket. That the locust, nachon, that you could eat or not eat, that was a question of identification. What? Okay? That's just a question of identification. Is this the right one or not the right one? So there, a gzera would be. You want to hear what a gzera would be? An example of a gzera, you can't eat locust at all. That would be a gzera. Okay, because the Torah does say you could eat locust, but the Torah also says that if you eat an animal that you're not allowed to eat, a bug that you're not allowed to eat, oh my gosh, you're over on a lot of Yisurim. So Chazal could say, listen, forget it. Just don't eat anything. That would be a gzera. Why is that a gzera? Because Hashem didn't say that. Hashem said, there's some you could eat and some you can't eat. But I'm worried about what people are going to do and that they can make a mistake. And since eating a bug is really bad, I'm going to say forget it. take a step back. Don't eat at all. Okay, I'm going to limit us more than Hashem limit us, so that we don't chas v'shalom defy something that Hashem said. But there could be a machloket. You could say, "Come on, man, people have to eat. People have to eat. You can't do that. There are people who eat these things, and that's important." And then we'd have a machloket. We'd have a machloket whether we should do it or not. And who would have to make a decision? The Sanhedrin would have to make a decision whether you do a gzera or you don't do a gzera. Mamash is a machloket. That's what the Rambam said. There could be a machloket. V'arbei b'Talmud, Rab Ploni gazar mishum kach v'kach, Rab Ploni lo gazar. And what is the great example of a machloket he's about to bring now, that we have till this day? No, he's going to use one. Halo tir'eh, basar of b'chalav. Chicken and milk. Chicken meat and chicken and milk. Can you eat chicken and milk?
It's deoraita, you're not chayav.
Not only are you not chayav,
Because it says 3 times in the right, it repeats.
right, and therefore, can you have chicken or not?
No, you can't.
None of the three have anything to do with chicken. One says you can't cook it, one says you can't eat it, and one says you can't enjoy it. Nachon? Those are the three benefit from. That's what you learn from the 3 psukim there. None of them are talking about chicken in any way, shape, or form. They're talking about basar. What's basar? What? Oh, so this is what he's going to discuss. To not eat. So why don't we eat chicken and meat? Why don't we have chicken burgers with frying cheese, melted cheese on it? Why don't we have that? Because what's the gzera?
Like it's still considered as a meat, like a lamb.
So if you eat this, what am afraid is going to happen?
You might eat
You'll eat a cheeseburger, right? You may go that it's mutar, that it's okay. I'm going to see you eating this steaming piece of meat, what looks like meat, and cheese. I'm going to say, oh, the Chaim ate that. I can eat it too. So the Chaim ate that. That's what it's going to be.
So for example, it's like eating meat with a soy milk. Something like that.
It's okay. Soy milk.
One could make a gzera. Yes, it could. Right, you could make a gzera. We haven't, and we can't do it anymore. But you already said you know, to say, what about meat and soy milk? That may be in the same way as chicken and cheese. That may be the same thing. One could say there would be a gzera on that.
There's like a.
But there isn't, from what I know. But there's someone who does say you can't do that?
No, there's like a Rabbi in Malay Adumim. Just this story has been told to me that during the Pesach, the Rabbi decreed that the potato are part of the kitniot. Not kitniot, like flour, like
There's
rices.
an opinion in Germany.
And he said that
You can't eat it. Potato
we're
starch.
not able we're not gonna use potato starch, potato flour, starting from now in Pesach. And
Okay.
people said nobody's gonna listen to you. And nobody's listening.
I'll give you a good example. For Pesach is a great example of these things. They put out bisli, right? They're like snacks that they put out now that look exactly like regular bisli. Nachon? Bisli is right, the snack that you eat. They make it out of potato starch. It's completely fine. There's nothing wrong with it in any way, shape, or form. The only problem is it looks just like the bisli that you eat before, which is complete and total chametz. Okay? It's unnerving almost to eat it on Pesach. You eat it and you're like, this is wrong. this shouldn't be. It's scary. In other words, and so food has lots of these kinds of elements.
Kitniot is a gzera itself.
Nachon, kitniot is gzera. Nachon. But it's at a time when there are no gzerot. So remember, everything the Rambam is talking about is only Vichora, Beit Din HaGadol. They're the ones who can give this. Okay? Up until this point, we don't, in other words, nothing is in our halachic world. Nothing we've learned until now is in our halachic world. We don't do the discussions. What? Beit Din HaGadol. The Beit Din HaGadol are the ones who can, the Sanhedrin, are the ones who could decide these things. It's going to be a little more lo pashut here with Gzerot, okay? But Bigadol, the Rambam is in a world, is an ideal world where there's a Sanhedrin that decides these things. So he says there's a machloket. There could be a machloket with the Gzerot. And what happens? Here we go. V'alo tireh, basar of bechalav, hu gzera midrabanan, l'archik min avera. It's a gzera from Chachamim to keep you away from sinning. Ve'en isur min Torah ela basar be'ema Torah. The only isur from the Torah of milk and meat is with real meat of a kosher animal.
Kosher, this is
It's a Torah, kosher animal. Ve'asru Chachamim basar vof, and Chachamim said it's asur. Harchaka min davar asur, to keep away from the real thing that's asur. Umehem mishelo ra ligzor zot agzera, ki Rabbi Yossi Aglili haya metir basar of bechalav. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, he said it's okay.
Rabbi Akiva also.
I don't remember, but it could be. Ve'hayu anshei iro kulam ochlim oto. And the people in his time, they would really eat it. In Rabbi Yossi Aglili's area, in his city, in the Galil, they would eat. You would go from I don't know, you go from the Shomron, where you're not allowed to eat this, and you would pass over into this other place, and everyone would be eating chicken burgers with cheese. Nachon, with Sfaradim, nachon. And that was the situation. Why? Because the gzera is, you could have a machloket on a gzera. וכאשר תיפול הסכמה לגזרה מאלה הגזרות גם כן, and when there's an agreement about the gzera, then you're not allowed to go over it when it's decided. And then he adds something else. וכאשר התפרסם איסורה בישראל, and when this gzera becomes common in Israel, אין אפשרות לחלוק על אותו הגזרה. ואפילו הנביאים לא יוכלו לסתרה. Now he says an interesting halacha, very interesting. It's a boutique halacha, a little bit, this halacha. And he says, when a gzera has shifted from not only being, and it's important, this differentiate. He says, a gzera has to start from whatever, it starts from Chachamim. And then it needs to get officiated. That's one level. But lich ora, it's officiated now. The next generation, someone could de-officiate it. They could come and say, no, this gzera was nachon for 20 years ago. It's not shayach achshav. Could that be? Could be, nachon. It could be that. But he says there's another stage. Once a gzera disseminates within all of Am Yisrael, then it can never be retracted. Okay, there are gzerot that can never be retracted.
Not even by
Those lemashal, and Lasar, I don't think it can be retracted anymore. Okay, it can't be retracted anymore. No, they can't. The Rambam here ties the hands of a gzera. It's unique about a gzera. Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, he says, right? Afilu haneviim lo yuchlu l'satra. Even prophets wouldn't be able to say. Va'amar Talmud sheleahu lo yuchol listor echad mishmona asar davar shegazru aleim beit Shammai beit Hillel. Even Eliyahu Navi can't stop it. V'imkuze v'amru lefi she'isuram pashat b'chol Yisrael. So here I want to be careful. Okay, a gzera that has been given the chotemet, given the ishur of a stamp of approval, and then goes out to Am Yisrael and gets and is accepted by all, that becomes almost part of the Torah in that sense. Okay? It's not deoraita, it's the Rabbanan, but it is very powerful. Now, why do we have to follow a gzera?
It says in the Torah.
What does it say?
Listen to your rabbi.
What does it say?
Listen to whatever they say.
No, that's not what it says. What does it say? We read what it says. Asu mishmeret lemishmarti. Nachon? Mishmeret lemishmarti. It says asu mishmeret lemishmarti, right? It said v'shmartem et mishmarti. It says in the pasuk, u'shmartem et mishmarti. You will keep my keepers or my gates or whatever, or my things that need to be kept. We know that Hashem said, make gzerot. Go ahead, make gzerot.
As it says that you have to listen to them.
That's also part of it. We're going to see that in a minute. Okay, that the Rambam is going to bring. I said the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin needs to get the Sanhedrin. Yes, it needs to be the Sanhedrin.
So they would hear the Zera.
The opinions.
Some rabbi made, or
Yeah, they would hear. They would ask him. You would come in. You have the discussion, and then you vote. It is the Supreme Court, but it's more important than the Supreme Court because their interpretations could become Torah, mamash.
How do you get on the Sanhedrin?
How do you get on the Sanhedrin? It's a good question.
We have
The
discussed
the
it.
Sanhedrin has smicha. You have to have smicha, which we don't have now anyway, right? Their mamash had to be smuchim, and then it was mamash a talich, a process. You would start off. You'd have the Sanhedrin, whoever it would be,
You're in the
and
tail,
and then
you're
you would
in
have
the-
and then you have the students who they would rank them. We've talked about. Remember, where they would mamash be ranked. It's a good question. No, it's a good question.
I think what
It was probably people of the Sanhedrin themselves ranked them.
automatic. If let's say one of the Zikinim Sanhedrin, like let's say Kassim Shalom died, and the other one will go automatically to the next.
Ken, I understand you go right up, but Josh is asking, how do you rank 1, 2, 3? Who sits
This
there?
is not what we. This topic we didn't talk.
No, but it's a good question.
How would we start a Sanhedrin again?
Oh, that's the Rambam who gives his unique statement that he says, Nir Ali, I think that if all or Rov Chachmei Eretz Yisrael get together and they do smicha, it will start again. That's what they tried to do in Rav Beirav and the Shulchan Aruch of Yosef Karo. That's what they tried to do. I say, and as I said it before, if all Talmidei Chachamim Eretz Yisrael can get together, it's already Mashiach's time. So I don't know where we are if we could do that time. If the Talmidei Chachamim could sit in one place and decide something together, man, we're in a good place. It's a good place. But so they tried, and Be'emet there was a machloket, and Chachmei Yerushalayim didn't buy into it. But that otherwise, I would have no idea how it would happen. Lichora, it can't happen. Or maybe smicha would be something new that we don't know what it is. But it's definitely not smicha now. When a rabbi says he has smicha now, it has pretty much I won't say zero meaning, but it doesn't have a lot of halachic meaning, okay? It means the guy knows a lot of halacha. Well, that in itself is important. But you also have to understand now the halachic authority of nowadays is very low. So they're very low. If a rabbi says to me to do something, in essence, I'm following because I assume he knows more than I do. That's pretty much what I'm doing. But the authority that we're talking about here of these kuzerot, or the interpretation of a mitzvah, whoa, way above us at the moment. Okay, even though we do it all the time. Everything now, right? All questions that come up now are. We always use the example of meat. That's that's going in the lab. That's a real doraita question. What it is. So there, and that decision that's going to be made is a real decision. The thing is, it can't obligate you. That's what I'm saying. It really can't obligate. In other words, it doesn't matter which rabbi, at what level he's going to.
Electricity, which was possible much later.
Right. It can't obligate you either. If you Josh decide. If you decide now, again, like the Rambam said, there's an assumption that you have done your utmost to understand what's going on here. And you've read everything and you know everything. It's not like what my students always love to say, I don't feel that it's right. That doesn't cut it in a serious discussion, okay? It doesn't cut it. Like, I don't think so. I don't. Well, who says? Learn it, be there, learn it well, and you have a say in halacha. No one has to be your Rav, per se. You could be your Rav. But if you are a honest person with yourself, you better know how to learn before you make a decision in halacha. That would be my decision. And anyone who's ever learned the tshuva, I think I brought it once in class after I was reading something just from Rav Yaakov Ariel, who's the Rosh Yeshiva of Ramat Gan, and a story of what happens if a kid borrowed a basketball from his friend, remember I mentioned in class, and then he gave it to someone else, and it popped when they were, whatever, it popped. So what do you do? What do you do in this halacha? And I was saying, what was remarkable for me is the breadth of knowledge that Rav Yaakov Ariel brings in this little simple lichora event, and he brings this, and then there's this, and this. You have to know so much to even answer a little question. So Josh,
Yeah.
In other words, to be honest with yourself, you better learn for a good amount of a period. To be able to give a real answer. But let's go on. Let's finish up the Gzerot. We did finish up the Gzerot. Beseder. Okay. Beseder. So that was the fourth part. Now everything here, the Gzera in a sense is a mitzvah almost. To make Gzerot is a mitzvah. The Gzera, so listen to what I'm saying. Okay, you guys, hold on. The Gzera itself is not mina Torah, but to make Gzerot is in the Torah. Okay? Again, Hashem says you should make Gzerot. He didn't say which Gzerot to make. So therefore, if you make a Gzera, I'm the Chachamim, I make a Gzera, it's not Deoraita. It's not from the Torah, but the authority of it is Deoraita. Is that there? So if I eat chicken and meat, I will not get lashes from the Torah. I may get lashes midrabanan, which we call makat mardut. There are lashes. There are lashes midrabanan. Okay, what?
You said chicken.
Chicken and cheese. Chicken and cheese. Okay, sorry. Chicken and cheese. So there, if I eat that, I'm over Gzera. So I'm not going to get lashes in Doraita, which I would have had if I had meat and milk. But you're going to get punished by the Rabbanan, whatever they decided is the punishment. So there. This is the shift from what we call Doraita to Rabbanan. All right? This shift from 3 to 4, that's the shift. Because 3 is still Doraita. 3 is be'etzem a further explanation of what the mitzvah itself is. This one already is clearly not part of the mitzvah. I'm not saying that Hashem said to do this, specifically. Hashem said to do a general thing I'm about to do, but specifically He did not say you can't eat chicken and milk. If someone comes to you and says, right, the prophet would come to say, this goes back to what the Rambam said before, if a prophet would say, you cannot eat milk, he made in a mitzvah, he died, that guy. That would be a death sentence for that prophet, because he's over on adding to the Torah. Can't do that.
So,
is that there?
I have a question now.
Yeah.
So now the Sephardi eat kitniot and Ashkenazi not, because we have Gezerah. Now my question is, what if Gezerat Hashem is actually...
Oh, you're saying it's a Gzera. I don't know if it's a Gzera. I don't know what it is, because we don't have any official Gzerot in the sense. It was a Gzera of those communities.
Okay, so now we're not eating chicken and milk together.
Right.
But those who are not covered in the time, let's say there's the resurrection of the dead and everyone rises and they said, you cannot eat chicken and milk, but we can.
The people here from Rabbi Yossi Glili's time,
Yeah.
Yes, lichora, they may be able to say that.
So we cannot have...
But they may not be able to, because it's already been accepted for all of Israel. So
they are not covered, or like...
Depends how many of them there are.
If we assume time travel, there may be a different discussion. But nowadays, once the Gzerah, that's what the Rambam said, once the Gzerah is decided, and it went off to all of Am Yisrael, that's it. But Kitniot, lemashal, there was no Sanhedrin to decide Kitniot. Okay? Now, it could have been accepted by all of Am Yisrael, but it wasn't. Nachon, it wasn't, and therefore it's an interesting discussion what to do with it. So, let's see if we could chop the Chelek HaChamishi, and then we finish all the 5 parts of the Torah. The Chelek HaChamishi, so what's missing? We have Halachot Mekubalot, Halacha Moshe Sinai, what we called category 3, which are new parts of the mitzvot themselves. So that there can be machlokot there, but they're deoraita. The 4th one are gezerot, which are not deoraita, even though the impetus to do them is deoraita. What's missing? Minhagim and takanot. Lemashal nerot Chanukah. What are those? Okay, here he goes. החלק החמישי הם הדינים אשר נתקנו על דרך ההתבוננות והבאת התועלת בעניינים הנוהגים בין בני אדם, ממה שאין בו תוספת בתורה ולא חיסרון, או בדברים שהם תקנת בני אדם בענייני התורה, והם אשר יקראו מהחכמים תקנות ומנהגות. But hold on here a second. So he just talked about two things called takanot and minhagot, and he threw them together, and they may not be the same thing. Okay? Lemashal, what I ask you, if I'd ask you, are washing your hands before bread, is that a minhag? No. It's a takana, right? Nerot Chanukah, Friyat Megillah. What is that? Fasting on Tisha
How would
B'Av.
you translate takana?
Takana is a what? A rabbinic mitzvah. But you can't use the same word to explain what it is here. It's a obligation, I would say. It's a rabbinic obligation. That's what it would be. Which is a rabbinic mitzvah. Is the same word because obligation is a mitzvah. I didn't do much better than you over here, but if it said that, that's what it would be. That's what we usually say. A takana means to do something. A gzeira is to not do something. It's really pretty much like an aseh and a lo ta'aseh. Sort of. It's a rabbinic aseh and lo ta'aseh. Okay? But the Rambam is dividing the two. So there's a gzeira that comes from mishmeret and mishmarti, and then there's takanot and minagot. Now, what he says, these are things that were made to a benefit. Hanuagim ben bnei adam, that are important to do for people. So the benefit, Lemashal, in another place he's going to say, Nerot Chanukah is to remember the miracle. There's a benefit for us as Am Yisrael to do this thing. There's a benefit in washing your hands for whatever benefit it is. Tahara, for remind us of the Kohanim, whatever it is. There's a benefit to this. That's a takana. A minhag, we're going to have to look at what the difference is, okay? What?
Your own tradition.
So he defines here, Rav Shilat, in his explanation, gives a very interesting definition, what the difference between the takana. Okay. So it's confusing. One second. What he brings us is, he says there are minhagim that we would call takanot, and there are minhagim that we usually call minhagim. And what's the difference? He says like this: L'umat zot, minhag shenagu ha'am, afilu hutchal al yedei neviim, im lo nikva ki hanaga mechayevet al yedei beit din hagadol, en chiyuvo milot asur, ve'en levarech alav ledat Rambam. The Rambam says there are minhagim that could become a takana. In other words, people started doing something and then the Beit Din said, we have to do that. It's sort of like Purim. If you guys remember, Purim starts off that people immediately start doing something. And then Mordechai says, okay, we're going to do this. You guys remember the Purim story at the end of Perek Tet, in the middle there, where the people personally start L'chgog and Lasot Yom Tov and sending things to each other. And then the next year, Mordechai says, we're going to make this a takana. That's what makes it chayav. And that's why you have to say a bracha on it, says Rav Shilat. An interesting thing. Why don't we say a bracha on a minhag? Because the minhag never received the stamp of the Beit Din. That's what we're looking for always, the stamp of the Sanhedrin, the stamp of the Beit Din. That's what makes a takana. And that's the difference between a takana and a minhag. A minhag are things that people do. And the Rambam says, so why do I have to follow a minhag? He says, Be'emet, it's interesting why you have to follow a minhag. We're all sitting here with kippahs on our heads. Lama? Why do we need a kippah on our head? It's a minhag. It's not a takana. No one said you have to do that. So it's not clear why we have to do that, Be'emet. Maybe because it's a kind of neder that Am Yisrael received upon itself, some kind of neder that we've received. It may be, brings another option.
This type of neder we cannot annul.
Again, he says a Kabbalah. Mekor hachiyuv lishmoa minhag kazeh hu kichol hanireh midin Kabbalah v'neder shel hatzibur. Some kind of acceptance that the tzibur accepted, and be'emet is on a much, much lower level than a takana. And that's why you don't say a bracha when you put on a kippah. It's you're doing a minhag. So there are minhagim are things. Now minhagim are much, much, much less obligatory. Okay? But a minhag that was started, even if the people started it. People started putting on kippahs. And Beit Din comes and says, you guys, we didn't make this takana. It's not our opinion. It's what people are doing, but it's why. It's a great thing to do. It's going to bring Yirat Shamayim greater. It's going to bring people together. Wonderful. We put our chotemet on it. That elevates it to something else. And then we may even say a bracha on it, possibly. So there? Like what happened on Purim. That's sort of what happened on Purim. It elevated it to a different level. So a takana could either start as a minhag and morph into a takana, or a takana could be a straight out, Chachamim said, listen, this needs to be done. We're going to do it without the people doing anything before. They made it up in a sense. They could start it off. These both things could be takanot and minhagot, which is probably what he's talking about here. Okay? He is not talking about what we usually call a minhag. When we usually say a minhag, we say it's be'etzem something that's done. We really don't really know so much why or what, or we could find out why, but it's much less authoritative. This isn't what the Rambam's talking about here when he talks about takanot and minagot. He's talking about really in essence the same thing. Two different directions where something becomes an obligatory rabbinic commandment. So there? That's probably what he means where he says minagot. Vasur la'avor alehem b'shum panim. Ho'il v'skima alehem ha'umma. And here he says, okay, because everyone agreed on it. B'kvar is here Shlomo me'avor alehem u'poretz gader yishchenu nachash. Anyone who follows this is going to get hurt. Ve'ela takanot em rabot me'od. There are many of these takanot. It's not just one thing or two things. Nizkarot b'talmud b'mishnah. מהם בעניין האיסור והיתר, מהם בעניין הממונות, מהם תקנות מאותם שתקנו נביאים, כמו תקנות משה, יהושע ועזרא. Moshe did a takana. What was Moshe's takana? Read the Torah. Moshe תיקן לישראל, שיהיו שואלים ודורשים הלכות פסח בפסח, right? He's the one who said you have to start saying halachot before. He's the one who said hazan b'shasher adaman. He's the one who defined the bracha of Birkat Hamazon. Ve'onam takanot Yoshua ve'Ezraim rabot. There are a lot of and Hillel who made the Pruz bull, right? Made a takana. V'itkin Rabbi Gamliel Zaken, v'itkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, v'itkin Rabbi Ploni, v'itkin Rabbi Ploni. And there are some who it wasn't a person, it was the General Assembly. Be'usha itkinu, o tiknu chachamim, o takanat chachamim v'arbe kayotze me'ele. Now, lich ora, there's still a question. Does every takana have a bracha or not? Obviously it doesn't. We don't say it, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kisharnu mitzvot tzivanu, lichtov Pruz bul. Pruz bul is the special, unique document that you do in Shemitah, so that all your chovot, your loans don't mitbatel, aren't annulled in the Shemitah year. Okay, it's a takana of Hillel. The takana of Moshe Rabbeinu, right? To start saying the halachot 30 days before the Chag. We don't say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kisharnu mitzvot tzivanu, lomar halachot 30 yom lifnei Chag, and start teaching Pesach right the day after Purim. Right? We don't say that. So not every takana has a bracha. Where does one end and the other begin? Very, very complex. Okay, how this works. Right, that's something else. Nachon. That's a big question why we don't do it in tzedakah. One say it's one of the reasons you're not sure that the person really needs tzedakah. You can never be sure. What? Plurvu. Also the same idea that you're not so sure that it will be successful. There are mitzvot that don't, and so the brachot, you're saying the brachot is its own subcategory of complexity of understanding how it works. This is enachon. But here already, the minhag and the takana, also we have to be a little careful with, okay? And the Rambam here said, the nation agreed on. And that's also a question, where in the world does the Rambam get that one from? So what if the nation agreed on it? Where does that come from? That becomes any authority in any way, shape, or form. So what Rav Shilat does is he builds it after the Beit Din says something, and then the Tzibur accepts it. So then you already have the basis of Chachamim. But we're just reading the Rambam, there may be this Ikaron. Why am I saying this? I remember, a quick story. I was learning in Hebrew U. I learned Hebrew U for 1 year at Chata'ai Anich Mezkir Ayom, my sins I mentioned today. I went to Hebrew U because I wanted to learn history. I was in the moment I wanted to learn history, I wanted to learn it seriously. And I went to Hebrew U. And one of the courses I had to like fill out because I didn't have I had a Torah, but it was in Chinuch, it was in Torah, it had nothing to do with history, so they made me take all these courses. And one of the courses I took was Islamic law. And that was the best course of all the courses. I was sitting there, and you hear halacha. It's a discussions in halacha. And I remember I would like have these discussions with the guy because I speak the language. I know how halacha works. Like everyone would be sitting there like sort of be quiet, and I would be talking to the guy because he understands halacha, Islamic halacha. I understand real halacha, and we were talking. And one of the big ikronot, so it was parts of Sharia, all kinds of different. It wasn't Sharia. There was another word. I'm blanking. But one of the big things in Islamic law was this: if it's accepted or not accepted. It was huge, big way of deciding halacha is if everyone does it or not. And it made me think. Here the Rambam says, "V'skima aleim ha'uma." Where is that anchored in our halacha? Where does it ever say that the people have a say in how halacha works? The Beit Din does. The Beit Din is shat psukim. They make decisions for Am Yisrael. But what does it matter that everyone accepted or not accepted? I don't have an answer, by the way. I'm asking this question. I answered them.
Like
what?
People accepted the
Na'aseh v'nashma.
It might not.
Interesting.
It might actually be Rambam coming from like the perspective of someone who lived in the Islamic world.
I'm going to pour water on you. But he's affected by the people around him.
Of course.
So that's an interesting. Well, or they're affected by him, which could also be. Should also be a question. But this concept of the tzibur having a power of a tzibur, so it's an interesting idea of Na'aseh v'nishma, that the tzibur accepted upon the Torah. Interesting. But I'm not sure. So I'm going to say I'm not sure exactly where it's from. But the Rambam throws it in here as this is sort of what makes it obligatory. And he also said with the Gzerot. Remember, he said the Gzerot, that was another level. There's a level of the Chachamim, and then when they accept it, boom, that's it. Gzerot can never change. By the way, he didn't say that about Takana. Is that there? He says, Asur la'avor aleim b'shum panim, but he didn't say it can't be changed. Remember in the Gzerot he said, and even if the Navi comes and he says no, it can never change. No one can change. He doesn't say that about the Takanot. Which is interesting. Ken, sir?
Isn't there a story where Joel goes to see what the Am does?
For sure, but that's the sort of to know what they didn't know what to do. And then they see and they say, that's right. Then they see and they remember that's the halacha. So it's not like the people originated or authoritated, they just showed because they remember, they have like some kind of inner knowledge that they did the correct thing. This one is saying the fact that they accept it cements it in halacha. So Tov, Yeshel Koch. We learned 1 second. I'm warning you. Next week, I'm going to quiz you guys on the 5 parts. On the 5 parts of. I'm not joking. I'm going to quiz you on the 5 parts of halacha. You have to know this. This is the heart of the Hakdamot of the Rambam. Okay, this is the heart, because once you understand this, you understand when you start learning Torah, you better ask yourself every time, what is this? Every time you learn, you ask, what am I dealing with now? Am I dealing with this level, this level, this level, this level? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? If you start learning that way, it's a completely different way of learning Torah. You know where you are. And each one has its own different, unique ways of learning. Because if I'm talking about Halakha Mekubelet, there's no machlokot. And if I'm in Halakha category 3, right, that's the mitzvah that's learned out, then there could be a machloket, but it's going to be doraita. And if it's a takana, it's the Rabbanan, but I have to follow it because Psukim we didn't mention yet, Vasita kechol asher yerucha, that we're supposed to listen to the Chachamim. Seder? all these things you have to understand when you're learning Torah, where you're standing. Okay? And what point you are. So, Bezrat Hashem.